Come on in, welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're talking about 5 Survivor swing votes that somehow got themselves voted out. Being the swing vote is often the most powerful position in the game. You're in between two alliances, and your choice alone dictates which side moves forward in the game, and which side is reduced to the dustbin of Survivor history. This is usually a great spot to be in, because you have all of the power and none of the risk of going home. Usually. Throughout Survivor history, there have been several players who played the swing vote role so hard, refusing to commit to either group, that one or both alliances just came together and said, you know what, let's just get rid of this person instead. It's a rare but impressive maneuver, going from the most powerful spot in the game to having your torch snuffed later that very episode. Why, you just have to be very not super good at Survivor to do that. All that said, let's dig into 5 Survivor swing votes that swung themselves right out of the game. At number 5 is Big Tom in Survivor All-Stars, who positioned himself as the swing vote at the Final 5, only to get Boston robbed. At the Final 5 of All-Stars, the Chapera 2.0 Alliance had made it. They wiped the smuggest tribe in history, Mogo Mogo, off the map. For most of the post-merge, Robs had this game on cruise control, winning immunities and voting out his enemies with occasional make-out breaks. But here at Final 5, for the first time in the game, Rob's domination is genuinely threatened. The breakdown of the tribe is as follows. In one corner, Rob and Amber from original Chapera, a genuine island romance that is very obvious to everyone. In another corner, Jenna and Rupert from original Saboga, who were swapped to Chapera mid-game, but who wormed their way into the majority quite well. And in the middle is Big Tom. Sort of. Up until this point, he's happily been a pawn of Rob and Amber's, but now he is entertaining the thought of joining with Rupert and Jenna to take Rob out. I think...
If we don't get Rob off, it's on.
If we don't get Rob off what?
I'm more or less happy with how All-Stars endgame played out, but it would be objectively hilarious if Rob's game, heretofore the most dominant and aggressive game in Survivor history, was upended at the 11th hour by a hillbilly with a feather in his ass, a man who lost a political race to Mike Pence, and the 5th or 6th most popular member of Pagong. She just edges out Joel. Rob, of course, recognizes that the only thing standing between him and Final 2 is Tom joining up with Jenna and Rupert, so he cleverly instigates a fight between the two of them, tattling on both of them to each other to ensure that they won't work together. Much has been made of this move over the years, but, and I say this as a Rob fan, is it really that hard to pick a fight between Rupert and Big Tom? I mean, you could just tell Rupert Big Tom said basically anything, and you'd have plausible deniability. Big Tom seals his fate in a post-challenge discussion with Rob and Amber by declaring himself the swing vote between the two alliances, despite the fact that he's supposed to be with them. Like, they're just sitting there calmly discussing whether to vote off Rupert or Jenna, and Big Tom just blurts out that he's in the middle. I'd love to play poker with this guy. With Boston Rob no longer an option thanks to his millionth immunity win this season, Rupert and Jenna join Romber and send Big Tom straight to the jury unanimously. As for how Big Tom ultimately voted, his vote went for... wait, Gina? Tom, she was on season 4. Okay, who left the whiskey out? From one Boston blindside to another, at number 4 is Matt in Survivor Redemption Island, who won his way back into the game at the merge after being voted out second, only to waffle on his loyalties and get a one-way ticket back to Redemption Island. As we're learning, if there's one thing you don't want to do in front of Boston Rob, it's tell him you've been considering voting him out. Matt was originally voted out second in Redemption Island, eliminated for the crime of good sportsmanship, but the battle back mechanic this season ensured he was down, but not out. He won duel after duel after duel, sending titans of this game like Krista, Stephanie, and Christina home. In his final showdown against Sarita to re-enter the game at the merge, Matt endures his most difficult test thus far, listening to Philip's coach impression.
Well, the Bushido Code was how a samurai knew how he had to conduct his life when he was facing difficult circumstances.
Wow, they really did just unabashedly put the most knockoff version of Coach they could find on this season, didn't they? Once Mr. Pibb over here is done chatting it up, Matt beats Sarita in the final duel and re-enters the game with a group of people who voted him out and a group of people he's never met. He could be bitter, but as a Christian man, he's forgiven Rob and Ometepe for their early game betrayal. But then there's a little wrinkle. Matt fits in much better and genuinely likes the Zapatera tribe way more than he does the Ometepe tribe. He and Mike are both Christian men whose faith is important to them. Ralph, Julie, and Steve are all straight shooters who are easy to get along with. And David's extremely loyal. He'd never betray a vow. So when Mike offers Matt and Andrea the opportunity to flip to Zapatera, it's understandably a tempting offer for Matt. He mulls it over aloud. Sure, he could vote out Rob. It's tempting and even logical. But would God want him to flip? Probably not. Matt decides to stay loyal to Ometepe, and that's all very nice, Matt, but why are you telling it to this guy? There's really no excuse for this level of game naivete. It's not like these people hadn't seen Boston Rob vote off anyone who so much as looked at him cockeyed in 3 entire seasons prior to this. Just the idea that Matt was entertaining joining Zapatera is enough for Rob to pull together one of the most cold-blooded moves in history, rallying Ometepe to send Matt, who, again, literally just re-entered the game like a day ago, back to Redemption Island, ensuring Rob's complete control of the game as he's left with a bunch of passive allies, and Zapatera is now without an immunity idol. David practically begins writing his thirsty jury speech for Rob at this very moment. At number 3 is Dolly in Survivor Vanuatu, who played the swing vote between the younger women and the older women at Yasser's first tribal council, only to get voted out of the game second. It's day 4 on Vanuatu, and alliances are starting to form on the Yasser tribe. There's the crew of young women, headed by Mia and including Eliza, Julie, Dolly, and Lisa, who's young at heart. Then there's the Denny's Early Bird Special crew, Twyla, Scout, Amy, and Leanne. There is a crack in the young woman's alliance, though, namely sheep herder and Michelle voice impersonator, Dolly.
4 people want to vote one way and 4 people want to vote another way, and I'm kind of the deciding factor.
Recognizing their minority position, the Golden Girls begin leaning hard on Dolly, who's by far the least committed to the young woman's alliance and the most impressionable. Dolly really was just too nice for Survivor. She kept flip-flopping her vote because she felt guilty voting for anyone. The older women are targeting Eliza for obvious Eliza reasons, and the younger women initially target Twyla, but ultimately switch their vote to Leanne because Twyla is almost single-handedly keeping this tribe running. All the while, both alliances are jostling for control of Dolly's vote, and anytime someone talks to her, she is aggressively non-committal and kinda just shrugs at whatever plan is presented to her. Even when she does ultimately half-heartedly agree to vote with the younger women, it isn't exactly convincing. Before their first tribal council, Eliza and Leanne compare notes and realize that Dolly's playing both sides, and in the first of many Eliza moves made out of desperate self-preservation, she suggests that she and the older women just vote off Dolly instead, which is exactly what happens. The first 2 players on this list got sent home as swing votes because they were not super good at Survivor. The next 2 went home because the swing vote power went to their head. But Dolly went home because her lack of commitment genuinely came from a place of guilt. In her final words, she's relieved she was voted out. Back to the farm, this game just isn't for her. I'd recommend Chutes and Ladders instead. Even that might be too competitive. Maybe like a ball and a cup game. At number 2 is Christy in Survivor Amazon, who was the swing vote between the men and the women at the end of the game. At the final 6 of Amazon, Christy is in the middle of 2 alliances. This is the first time Christy's truly been in power this entire season, and she milks it harder than Purple Kelly on a dairy farm.
You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
Christy's torn between siding with Rob, Matt, and Butch, or Jenna and Heidi. It's a major dilemma. She genuinely enjoys the company of the guys, but all have winner equity. Well, Matt actually doesn't, but he was perceived as such. The only thing Matt was going to win was possibly a Freddy versus Jason versus Matt showdown, which is now a movie you wish existed.
It's creepy. It's creepy.
On the other hand, there's Jenna and Heidi, her wicked stepsisters whom she hates, but who she thinks she can beat. Christy's position here is unique because there's a major rift between Rob and Jenna and Heidi. The previous round, Rob flipped on them to vote out Alex, and Heidi and Jenna are understandably furious with him. Christy's swing vote position seems extra safe because the odds that Rob, Jenna, and Heidi would work together again is basically zero. But like Sierra Dawn Thomas waiting for a phone call to get a second chance at Survivor, you should never say never. It's hard to overstate just how cocky Christy is in this episode. She really relishes having Jenna and Heidi's fate in her hands. As we get closer and closer to Tribal Council, everyone's waiting on pins and needles for Queen Christy's decision to be handed down. Poor Rob over here looks like he's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He takes Christy aside one last time, and she tells Rob she won't decide until the pen is in her hand at Tribal Council. Oh, and by the way, Rob, you're the target. What is it with Robs and voting out swing votes? Rob immediately marches over to Heidi and proposes that the two of them, plus Jenna and Matt, all just vote out Christy instead. Rob's really putting his life in their hands here. If he and Matt vote for Christy and Heidi and Jenna still vote for Rob, he's gone by plurality. But his trust is well placed. At Tribal Council, Rob, Matt, Jenna, and Heidi pull off one of the best blindsides ever, as Christy is completely shocked to see 4 votes come her way, and on her way out the door gives us the most bitter final words this side of Jeff Kent.
I'm gonna make sure those freaking evil stepsisters of mine are not gonna win the $1 million.
I love that she blames Jenna and Heidi for this for some reason. And sorry, Christy, but you'll be eating those final words soon. What are you gonna do? Vote for Michael Myers over here? The most iconic Survivor swing vote that swung themselves straight out of the game is Sarah at the merge vote of Survivor Cagayan. Heading into the merge of Cagayan, the two post-swap tribes pledged to each other to stay strong at the merge, no matter what. Everyone on New Solana is super tight, but they're in the minority, down 1 player. New Apari holds the numbers, but is far less solid as a group. Cass in particular has concerns about 2 members flipping, Sarah and Jeremiah. All of Sarah's former Brawn tribe mates are on the other tribe, and all of Jeremiah's old beauty allies are as well. The concerns about Sarah, I get. As we'd see in her future appearances, she's a gamer. Jeremiah, I'm not as convinced, was playing that hard. His biggest move was keeping his modeling career under wraps, which he feared would paint him as just a dumb, southern, pretty boy. Yeah, Jeremiah, it'd be a shame if that's how you were perceived. When we get to the merge, Tony works overtime to get Sarah on his side. Before the swap, Tony's closest relationship was with Sarah. They had an alliance, Cops Are Us, so he leans into those bonds to convince her to swap over. Of course, her post-swap alliance is also counting on her to vote with them. Sarah begins having second thoughts about her new alliance when they don't immediately bow to her wishes of who to vote off from Solana. She wants to take out a big gun like Tony or LJ, but everyone else wants to play it safe this round and go for Jeffra or Trish. Sarah's pro-Tony argument? No way Tony has an idol. Yeah, the guy who spends 23 hours a day scampering around in the bushes? No way he has an idol. The second Sarah gets any pushback at all on this vote, she begins flaunting her swing vote status. Sarah gets 8 confessionals this episode, and all of them are about how in power she is. Any future players watching, if they're trying to get you to repeatedly say how in control you are in increasingly unhinged ways, take a hint.
I will make the decision on who goes home next. I get to decide. I'm the president right now.
Sarah ends up committing to her original post-swap alliance after she railroads them into voting for Tony. But Cass is so irritated with her that when Trish approaches her about taking Sarah out instead, she jumps at the opportunity to blow up the entire game. It all culminates in one of the greatest tribal councils ever. Tony pulls out his idol and wears it, forcing Spencer and Tasha to change the vote to Jeffra. After the votes are cast, Tony plays his idol for LJ, and LJ plays his idol for Tony, but both misread the vote. And yet none of that even matters, because Cass flipped on Sarah and sends her to the jury, deposing the president of Survivor Cagayan. Wow, if only every coup were this fun. Don't be a freaking evil stepsister. Like and subscribe, and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.